Yeah, I try to take everything as a challenge and try to find ways to overcome the challenge. A lot of people just would get scared. Like, I deal with big numbers for a relatively small nonprofit. They're pretty big numbers, but I just look at it as a challenge, and I try not to eat the elephant all at once, but get it into little bites. But sometimes that can be a challenge. The overwhelm, that sense of overwhelm can be scary.
Right.
And I have people that depend on me for paychecks and all those kinds of things. So it does weigh on me a little bit, but.
From Dallas, Texas, this is Spool, hosted by Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Today on the Spool, we're exploring how art really is reshaping our cities, and one in particular is at the center of our interest, Arlington, otherwise known for the Cowboys. But in the midst of this wonderful city is a new art museum that has really become a marker of its newly emerging identity. My guest is Chris Hightower, CEO of the Arlington Museum of Art, whose team just opened a spectacular new venue. We're really thrilled to have him here. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you?
Have a seat. Thanks for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
These days we talk a lot about the importance of art museums, that their role respectively for our cities, that art in lots of ways transforms our cities. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, I agree completely. It feels like the heart and soul of a community in a lot of ways. When I was growing up, my grandmother would take me to museums, and both my parents worked, and so I'd be at home in the summer by myself. So she'd pick me up, and one day we'd go to one museum, another day we'd go to another museum, and I just looked forward to that so much. But it's the time that you're spending with somebody that you love that makes it really that more powerful. So yes, just having the art museum is one thing, but the other thing is the time with loved ones. That's so important.
But I find that interesting. I don't know, like back in the days I played a game called SimCity. And if you did everything right in SimCities, you aligned the streets and the population grew and the industry grew, and it was a productive city.
Right.
And if you did everything well, you get as a reward an art museum, but it was more like an afterthought. It was not critical to the success of the city. It was just something thrown in to it. Nowadays, we read books like Charles Landry or something like that, The Creative City, and we start to understand that maybe an art museum is not the luxury afterthought, but it's part of the fabric of our cities.
There's a book called Soft Power.
That's right.
Where it talks about the value that a museum adds to a city or to a community that I think people often overlook. A lot of times you can see the sports arenas and stadiums.
You have one like that as well over in
We
Arlington,
do,
right,
yes.
right.
We have several of those.
That's right. But you're like right in the thick of things.
We are in the thick of it, yes. Which makes it really great because there's people that come to town for not just the games, but the concerts, and there's rodeos and all these activities in the stadiums. So they're coming to town anyway and looking for something to do that second or third day they're there. So it really makes a lot of sense that we're right there.
You just casually mentioned they're coming into town, and this is also who are these museums for kind of question. And I think one of the stunning statistics about the Arlington Art Museum is that over 50% of your visitors are coming from radius beyond the 50 miles or something
Beyond
like that?
50 miles, yeah. So we would call those cultural tourists.
Right.
So there's people that are traveling just to do something of culture, which really shows the value of what we're offering for our community. So it's not just the tax dollars of when the people come to town and they buy things and go to eat and stay in hotels, but it's also what we're attracting for the community.
Thinking about the number of visitors, there's an economic function to a museum. I mean, any visitor who comes to visit your museum comes to the city, flies and drives in probably eats, stays, and so on and so forth. So there's obviously the economic function of
Right.
museums. But I think you're trying to suggest that there's more to art museums than just simply the economy.
Sure, I think so. I think it's the heart and soul of the community. It's a place for people to gather and have conversation. We love to have exhibits where it provokes a conversation. We want people to talk. You know, we don't want it to be like a library where you can't talk and engage in a conversation. We want it to be a place where people can talk freely about things that are happening in our community today. So there's a lot of functions, in my opinion.
When you emphasize community and the kind of coming together, I mean, is there on the flip side a little bit the built-in assumption that today in our societies we have less and less of that, and the museum is still one of those spaces that provides that?
I think it's a key thing for people to have parks, you can't always be in a park. Some days it's cold, rainy, wet.
It's rainy.
You never know.
Yeah.
So you have to have other public places.
Right.
And I think a museum plays that function. You can go to a library and have a conversation, but it's frowned upon, if you will.
Yeah.
So a museum is a good place to have conversation. Hopefully the art will provoke a conversation of some sort.
Though one would say that even libraries these days have changed. If you go to the public libraries these days, there are also places
You
of
never
meeting,
know.
community engagement,
Yes,
and
yes.
so on and so forth. But so in order for that art museum to be that place of a community and to be that attraction, what does it take? I mean, there's also a lot of talk about art museums being challenged in terms of numbers of visitors declining, public funding declining, interest of donors, turning elsewhere. So what does it take what's the magic formula for a museum to be successful?
Well, I wish I had the magic answer.
Well, this is what you're here. This is what we want to hear,
But it's a very, very good question. It is very complicated. It takes all of those pieces.
Right.
So if you look at the business model, and that's most of what I do in my job is look at business models. So we've got sales, which are the tickets, the rentals, rentals we have, the gift shop, all those ways that we sell things at the museum. And then we have the development aspect, which are the memberships, the donations, the sponsorships, the grant writing, all of those things. And they all have to work together for it to work. And it's complicated. It's a lot more work than people would ever know.
Tell me, the Arlington Art Museum is a little different from other art museums insofar as it's not one that is trying to be comprehensive. It's not the from to, right? It's not like here's the wing about early modern, the Renaissance, here's whatever, the Romanticists and so on and so forth. So that gives you a certain flexibility of sorts, right?
Which goes back to your previous question.
The magic formula.
Part of our magic formula is that we like to mix it up.
Right.
We will do a pop culture exhibit one day, and then the next day we'll do, well, not day, 3 months later we'll do, a high art
So
exhibition.
you also have a fairly high rotation, right?
Yes,
So that's
yes.
so the wide-ranging topics. So right now you have Game of Thrones, I believe, right?
And we have a UTA master's program exhibition in our space. So we've got art, and community. We actually have 3 spaces that we talk about. Our community art space, which is 5,500 square feet. That's where the UTA exhibition is.
Right.
We like to focus on community art, also regional artists and emerging artists. They need a place for them to really launch into the art world. Right. They have to get their foot in somewhere, so we offer that opportunity. Then we have a 13,000 square foot, what I would call a traditional experience. Right now, that's where the Game of Thrones exhibit is. Then we have a 20,000.
But you mentioned this so casually. This is a big collaboration that made this possible.
Yes.
You want to just say a little bit? I mean, Game of Thrones has a little bit of a following, so you might as well talk a little bit about what you have there, right?
I appreciate you allowing me the plug. Yeah. We just called HBO, and of course HBO
As
didn't
one
know
does,
They didn't know what to do with this, so they tossed us around. We finally got to the right person at Warner Brothers, who recently purchased HBO, and they contacted the archives, which were in Belfast at the time. They were selling off part of the archives from the show because it's been a long time since the show ended. The rest of the stuff was sent to London, and so they put us in touch with the archivists in London, and so we just got to having a conversation and said, we curated the show. It's not been traveling. There's no traveling show. There's no, like, you can't just tack this on. This is a one and only kind of deal. The cool thing about it, what's come out of it, is that the Warner Brothers folks have been here to Arlington to see what we're doing. And they like it so much, they said, will you come to our archives in LA, look and see what we have, and what else could you put together?
And you said, of course, oh no, why
Right.
would I, right?
Well, and that's really how things have worked for us, is that we develop a relationship and it goes to another place.
So this is community, but also really global partners and engaging with
Yes.
them that allows this to thrive.
Yeah.
So how has the show been going, Games of Thrones? Does it attract lots of folks?
It's doing very well right now. We're in our second month, I think,
Right.
and it's going to do very well. It'll probably be our top.
I was about to say this.
Yeah.
And then prior to it, in the spring, you had Asher, right?
MC Escher, yes.
And so really different, right?
Totally
If
different.
you hold these two together,
Totally
normally they wouldn't be in the same
Sentence, or
right?
paragraph.
or paragraph, or
Chapter.
space, or any of the above, right?
Right.
But also fascinating.
Yes.
In terms of the play with perspectives and
It was an
likes.
incredible exhibition, and we added some, going back to the magic,
Right.
we try to make it an experience for people, so it's not just here's a piece of art, here's a piece of art. We try to make it an experience for people so that it feels a little immersive, a little more engaging with people. So we have, 360 video experiences. We have
You had
walk-in
the
experiences.
Infinity Room, right?
Infinity Room,
Right.
yeah, things like that, to make it a little more, so they can experience it rather than just seeing it on a wall.
Well, you moved into Arlington's entertainment in this district, the city's esports stadium and expo center. So you're really in the middle of all kinds of other attractions. Is that distracting from what you have to offer, or is it adding, or how would
think-
you describe that partnership with the other institutions there?
I think it adds, definitely. It gives people an opportunity. There's the National Medal of Honor Museum that just opened right after we did, and we share a parking lot. So it's the proximity of all the things that you can do in Arlington that are right there together, which makes it, I think, really kind of synergistic, really works.
But it also creates then this idea that folks come to for a number of reasons, like you said, for the game, for the other show, for the museum. So Arlington is really becoming a destination of sorts for travelers, right?
I think you'd be surprised. I think they reported 16 million visitors last year to Arlington, which sounds crazy, but we see it at the museum, so I'm not surprised.
Talking about visitors, I mean, we just talked about the shows this year. You have something really exciting coming up, which is, kind of relevant to the World Cup coming up. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Sure, we'll have several World Cup exhibitions, if you will. One is a partnership with FC Dallas. One is a partnership with the UTA Library.
All right.
And then we've got one that's coming from, the partnership is a FIFA museum out of Zurich, and the collaborators in Rome. So we're going to be pulling that over from Europe, which is going to be it's a very FIFA intense exhibit with all the Pele and all the people that have been around for years in the FIFA world.
You want to name all the German soccer players this one. I could tell you were just on the edge of it.
If I
right?
knew who they were, I would do that. And then we've curated our own world exhibition that will reflect how soccer is shown around the world. So from Asia, all the continents, it will except Antarctica, of course.
Well, it's one of the, you just talked about the importance of the art museum as a kind of community builder. Soccer clearly has had that quality.
Yeah.
And also the quality really of bringing together folks from very different walks of life, right?
Right.
Which ideally museum is also supposed to accomplish, that it, respectively, it speaks when we say community, we
Right.
mean all parts of the community as
That's
well.
right. And I think sometimes you wouldn't think of an art museum hosting a World Cup exhibit, but at the Arlington Museum of Art, we feel like it's part of that community. Like
Right.
this is an experience we're all experiencing. We've got 9 games that are going to be in Arlington.
Wow.
And it's at AT&T Stadium, which is just a couple of miles from our museum. So why wouldn't we do that? It may not be high art, but it's still part of what our cultural experience is. People that love soccer are going to love the exhibition.
Which there are many around here, right?
Yeah.
Hence, we have all the games. We'll be in World Cup fever here.
Yeah, we're lucky to have all of that.
Yeah, no. And it'll bring even more visitors who presumably, once the team have lost, they're all going to go to the museum probably.
Yeah, I hope so. I think they are telling us to expect each one is like a Super Bowl. So that many people will be coming to each game. So if we've got 9 in Arlington, that's like 9 Super Bowls in a matter of a month.
Yeah, and that's a lot of moving pieces.
A lot of people.
Yeah. Tell me now, we are still tracking here the magic formula. So quick rotation, lots of different topics all the way now to FIFA and World Cup. So in other words, tying in with, other things that are happening. But how about yourself? I mean, you went to TCU for your BA, and then in between you went to University of Georgia, and then you returned for more to TCU. But that was part of your educational experience and journey.
Yes.
All along you otherwise developed your own business, and you were on the board of the museum at first, right?
Yes, I was on the board for a few years. My mother was on city council, and then she was a state representative. And they called me to be on the board, and I said, I don't have an art background, so why do you want me on the board? And they said, because you can raise money. And I was like, fair enough, I'll do it.
All right.
So that's kind of how I got my start there. But my background in building businesses and administration at TCU and the other work that I've done, all that plays into play with what I do now.
So what are, obviously the move into the new location helped you guys a lot. All these fascinating new exhibits are great. What are the big challenges in your mind that a museum like yours is facing despite all those great accomplishments?
I would say there's 2 challenges. One is a really interesting one. It's marketing. It's really hard to market to the community these days. In the old days, you do it on television or radio. Well, now, radio's kind of iffy. The people are listening to Spotify and Pandora or whatever else they listen to, or their own playlist. Where do you catch people?
Right.
And doing it on TV, well, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense because they're streaming anything and everything. So where do you catch people?
So where do you? Well,
Yeah,
because we're trying to figure this out as well. So
Sure
do tell.
So right now we're doing a lot of social media.
Okay.
That seems to be the best place that we can find, and we.
There's a lot in social media. It's a fairly dense and competitive and short-lived
Yes.
market, right?
And it could be a whole nother job.
Right. No, that's true.
It's very true. And we've found ourselves looking for influencers more frequently that know people in the area, like Dallas Loves List and other things like that. So that is one of the big challenges, is how do we get the word out to the community? And it's expensive. We live in an expensive media market. The other challenge is always raising money, which what 506.
Yeah, no, we're all in the same
Doesn't
business,
go through that, yeah.
Well, the big cultural institutions, whether it's museums or universities, they're all facing similar challenges in terms of
Yes.
making themselves visible, staying relevant, engaging the communities. How about good old billboards?
We have done billboards.
Because we do have our little highways here and there. And we do get stuck on them usually, right, with the traffic.
We've done them several times, and they're expensive. They're about $8,000 a month for one. It's hard for us to really know what the ROI is on that.
That's true.
We do, I come from assessment and accreditation background, so I'm always crunching numbers and looking at data. I don't really see the ROI there based on the data that we get back. So we know that they work, but to what extent is the question.
If you're doing things like Games of Thrones or FIFA, then in a certain way it becomes easier because there's a ready-made community out there of fans, right?
Exactly.
So as long as you're able to tap into that, then all of a sudden you're activating a whole network onto itself.
That's exactly right. Last year we did 2 exhibits with Disney, and we tapped into that Disney community, and it really worked.
So audience, finances, what are the other challenges?
We have developed relationships around the world really well. I think that's probably a critical thing for most people to try to figure out, where do I get these things? And we are not afraid to just pick up the phone and call. Say, hey, I know you've never heard of us, but we want to have Keith Haring exhibit. Developed a relationship with the Rubell Museum, and we've hosted 2 or 3 exhibits with them. I think it just takes that gumption, I guess, just to pick
Extra
up the
effort,
phone and
just
call.
yeah, well, it's just that I think, well, but it shows us another way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
If you just
Yeah.
proactively are trying to locate someone. Technology is the one that I was expecting you to say the other big challenge.
Yeah.
Usually technology is thrown into the mix,
I would say it helps us a lot. Technology helps us a lot, as it does everybody. I would say where it's tricky is that social media aspect.
Right.
And each social media has its own little quirks, so knowing everything, that's where it gets tricky.
Do you see any changes, in terms of generational differences? So if you look at orchestras or symphonies
Yeah.
of sorts, I mean,
Definitely. We
you
definitely
really
do.
see like an age,
We
component to all of that.
definitely
So how is
do,
that in a
yeah.
museum like yours?
It works really well for us, but we don't have a specific age group that comes because we do a variety.
Such different.
Yeah,
ways.
for instance, we had a relationship with Universal Studios last year, and after the film Wicked had been released, we were able to host a small exhibit of 6 of the pieces from the show, the costumes, with the costume designer. And we had a ton of people that came, and I think that audience age range was like 25 to 35.
All right.
But then Escher, is more
It's
like
just like went
45
up
to
and
65. So I think it just depends. But the good thing is that we're getting people across the board and getting them engaged with the museum in one way or another.
Well, and you and I talked earlier a little bit about why, we're so passionate about museums. And so it's, often the memories that one has about one's own experience, which is usually tied to going with your parents. And so there's this multi-generational dimension to museums visits usually as well, right?
Yes. I think just sharing time together. It's a date place too. We've had couples that met there or proposed there, and then they came back. They've invited us to their wedding. So I think it's just it's a place where people can come and spend time together.
Aside from FIFA, which obviously fascinates me to no end, what other shows are you currently working on?
Well, Jane Austen, this is a Jane Austen year.
All right.
So we are pulling our relationship with Universal back in. We're going to do an exhibition of some of Jane Austen films, so Sense and Sensibility, some of those, where that announcement's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So that's coming. That's a free exhibition. So we'll be doing that in conjunction with the National Jane Austen Society. So that'll be a fun exhibition.
So, but it means everything that you do, you start from scratch, because each one of your exhibits is so unique that you have an entire different set of partners. And
I will tell you, it's a love-hate relationship. It is a lot of work. We have a small staff, but we love it. We love what we do. We love being fresh and new, and there's something always exciting to see, and it's a lot of fun. And we're also doing an IndyCar is going to be in Arlington this spring, and we're working with them on a small IndyCar exhibition too, that'll be fun.
so how is the kind of, how do you come up? Okay, FIFA is FIFA. It's coming up next year, and so you guys may be thinking, okay, is there some FIFA angle or another? But how do you come up with the rest of the ideas?
Well, that's the thing. We sit together in a room and we will pitch ideas.
Okay.
And then once somebody has an idea that we think, okay, well, that's interesting, we ask them to develop it a little bit. And then we kind of vote on it. I mean, it's a little bit democratic, but then, of course, there's always money. There's always the kind of defining.
Rather the challenge. So that means also for each project you have to raise money. There's no fixed budget that you can rely on that is big enough to say, okay, this year we're going to go big.
Yes, it makes it very complicated. But we have several models that we can use that, we'll say, well, this exhibit is like a Knight's Tale exhibit, so it should do about this much money and should cost this much. So we do a lot of our projections based on types of exhibits. Like this one feels like a Disney exhibit, or this feels like a Keith Haring or an MC Escher.
So then you have certain assumptions about what attendance could look like, what income revenue you may generate on the basis of that.
Again, I'm a data nerd, so I dive deep into all of that.
Well, but it's still,
but it helps.
It's an educated hunch, right? It doesn't always work out, and
That's
sometimes, which exhibit surprised you, where you thought, okay, this is what I'm looking at, and then it became this?
Huge. Escher is one of those. It has a following. Keith Haring, I mentioned that one. Ansel Adams, we did an Ansel Adams. He has a series of museum pieces that he selected himself that were his best pieces. It was just a shock. People just kept coming, and I was like, where are these people coming from? But you never know how any one exhibit, it's kind of like a movie, you know, you make a movie and you think it's going to be a blockbuster, but sometimes it's not.
But that's also the fun, right? That however deep one might dive into the data, it's not all that all is in there neither, right?
They don't always match up.
Exactly. You told us now a great deal about your job, the challenges, opportunities, but you haven't quite yet shared with us that you're Swiftie as well. So tell us about that.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a Swiftie. I became a Swiftie after. Yeah, I was actually, TCU was in the national championship, and I was in LA, and her team called us and said, we're going to be in Arlington at AT&T Stadium for our tour. Would you guys be interested in a Taylor Swift exhibit? Of course, I didn't believe it at first. I was on the phone. I was like, are you sure?
Some trickster was calling you, right?
But believe it or not, it was legit. We had a Taylor Swift exhibit, and I became a Taylor Swift fan.
Oh, I see. All right. Thanks for sharing that now with us. Well, any job also has its challenges, you know, professionally, but also they become personal challenges as well. You want to tell us any one of those that they always say from those you learn more than from your successes?
Yeah, I try to take everything as a challenge and try to find ways to overcome the challenge. A lot of people just would get scared. Like, I deal with big numbers for a relatively small nonprofit. They're pretty big numbers, but I just look at it as a challenge, and I try not to eat the elephant all at once, but get it into little bites. But sometimes that can be a challenge. You know, the overwhelm, that sense of overwhelm can be scary. And I have people that depend on me for paychecks and all those kinds of things. So it does weigh on me a little bit. But
never heard about eating an elephant, but I've got to remember that one, you know, and I can just about picture that it's not good for your stomach if you take the whole thing in at once. I want to thank you again, Chris, for being here with me. It was wonderful learning more about the wonderful work that you're doing at the museum. I'm Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School. Thank you for being with us today.